Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So the gospel story that we hear today is about the woman bent double, the woman who was bent over double for 18 years. And what we don't hear is that she heard that Jesus was there. It just says that she went to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as if she had been doing it week after week, year after year. And we hear that Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, but again, we don't know if he was in his hometown or in Capernaum, where he was, but he was where he always was on the Sabbath, teaching, preaching in the synagogue. And what we hear is that Jesus was teaching, and as soon as he saw the woman, he said, "You have been released from your ailment. You have been freed from your ailment." And he touched her, and she stood upright and began to praise. And the whole crowd praised with her, except the synagogue leaders, the religious leaders. And it says they were indignant, and said to Jesus, "How dare you do this? You have 6 days a week to do your work. Come on that day, not on the Sabbath day, to do your healing." And Jesus turns to them and says, "You hypocrites, which one of you of this whole assembly would not release your donkey on the Sabbath to give them water?" And I think about the many different ways that we are bound, the ways that we are bent over, the ways that we are brought low. And I think about the leaders bound by the rules, trying to live out the rules, trying to do the right thing. And I think of Jesus seeing this woman, and the word that the Jewish leaders used for you have 6 days a week to work, it wasn't toil work, it was create. And Jesus is saying, isn't it right to bring healing and health and wholeness every day of the week, to create new life every day of the week? But I don't want to focus on the tension between Jesus and the leaders. This was the third and last time that Jesus runs head-to-head with the synagogue leaders, and the third time that they blasted him. And there is that tension because of this is a new thing happening. They all know the rules, and they're trying to live by the rules, but instead, Jesus is the new thing. And they're all trying to figure that out. But what I keep going back to is that woman bent double for 18 years. 18 years of being bound, oppressed. But I think about my life, and I say to myself, who am I that God would notice me, or care for me, or die for me? Who am I that God would call me or heal me? And that's what we hear from Jeremiah today. We're going to be hearing from Jeremiah for the next 9 weeks. And what we know is that he was a young boy, about 10 years old. And yet God called Jeremiah to bring healing to the nations, but to bring healing through oppressing, smashing, bringing low. Because what we have known is that the people of Israel, the leadership of Israel, had gone astray, and the people of Israel had gone astray. And God was sending a prophet, as God had done time after time after time, to the people of Israel, to saying, you've gone astray. You are no longer living the life that brings you life, and it's time to be reformed. But there's Jeremiah saying, who's going to listen to me? I'm 10 years old. And God's saying, I have called you, and I will be with you. And not even will be, I am with you. To trust that even this 10-year-old boy has the power to bring the nations to their knees and to rebuild this nation. But as I was thinking about this woman brought low, thinking about her saying, who am I that God would even notice me. I think of the many ways that we are brought low in society. I think about that we all have these backpacks in life that we're carrying on our back, and people add things to them bit by bit that just puts more and more weight on us. I think about the first time that somebody makes fun of us, or teases us, or puts us down, that adds a rock or a stone to our weight. I think about the first time that we experience death of a pet or a loved one or a friend, and the weight of grief that bears down on us. I think of financial stress that weighs us down. But not only that, I think of society and the many ways that society brings us down with societal, systemic oppression and injustice. And I think about what happens when we're carrying that heavy load with us and how that load bends us over. Now, I know when I'm backpacking and I'm carrying a heavy weight on my back and have it evenly distributed, you don't really notice it until you go uphill. And you've got the chest strap and the hip strap, but you also, it's pulling back and you can't breathe because you can't fully inflate your lungs. And so the easiest way to do it is to bend, and when you bend, your lungs can expand. But at the same time, you're carrying such a weight and your world becomes very small. You don't see the beauty around you. You're not fully living. And I also know the relief when you take that pack off. And so as I'm hearing the gospel today of this woman who is rejoicing, praising because this weight has been lifted and she can stand upright, I also think about what is the good news? What is the lesson here today? And I think it's twofold. I think it is in part when we are feeling that weight, that oppression, that being bent double. For me, it's like the woman to keep coming back here, keep coming back to my community, keep coming to the people who can help me carry this load. And I also think about the psalm that we read today, Psalm 71, one of my favorite. I always say that, they're all my favorites. But it says, "In you, O Lord, have I taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Set me free. Be my strong rock, a castle to keep me safe. For you are my stronghold. You are my hope. You are my confidence since I was young." When we say those words, when we believe in God, when we trust in God, and that God has the power to sustain us and the power to lift that load with us, because Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are bearing heavy weight," that we can be freed. But I think the other part of that is that we are called, we have the authority, we have been given the power to look at oppression, injustice, the ways that we bind each other in this world. I think of systemic oppression that we don't even see. It's just been a part of our society forever. I think of my second daughter, who is an electrical engineer. Her name is Arwen, A-R-W-E-N, from Lord of the Rings. She got the interview because the name to the person seemed gender neutral. She went in for the interview, and the first thing out of the person's mouth was, "Oh, we already have a woman." Yes, it's a chuckle and an oh at the same time. I think of a colleague of mine, a friend of mine who is applying for a position, and I was listed as a reference, and I got a call on Saturday asking to give this clergy person a reference. And the person who was asking me the question said, "One of our concerns is that she's very direct." And that person said to me, "We know if it had been a man, we wouldn't have used, that wouldn't be a concern." So we know that, yes, much has changed and much has not. And we know that there is oppression, injustice, prejudice against old and against young and against differently abled people and against people of color, and it goes on. And we say, what can we do with this? How can we free each other from this weight? But remembering that we too have been empowered, we too have been called, we too have been given the authority to release these bonds for each other and for our society. The good news is this weight doesn't have to weigh us down for 18 years. That we have the power right here, right now, to lift each other up and to change our nation, transform our nation into one where all people can be freed of that weight. So how do we do that? And I go back to that psalm of assurance, that psalm that tells us that we are loved and that God will deliver us. God will keep us safe. God is our strength and our hope and our confidence. And with that assurance, we go out into the world to do the work. Amen.